It was April 2015. Me, my girlfriend, and my little brother, who was 9 years old, had gone to a small nearby movie theater on a Wednesday night to see the horror movie It Follows. We usually went late on weekends to get the whole theater to ourselves. Plus, I had off on Thursdays that semester. When we entered the theater at first, it seemed like we were the only ones inside the theater. But then my little brother pointed somebody out. He was a man in a dark grey hoodie, sitting in the top left corner seat in the theater. It was a little sketchy, but nobody would really give it a second thought. We picked upper middle row seats with a railing in front, and we each sat with an empty seat between us for more room. I know that sounds weird to do with my girlfriend with me, but having my brother there made it a different story. I was sitting closest to the edge, therefore the closest to the one other guy in the room besides us. Within 5 minutes, previews were over and movie was starting. The lights in the theater dimmed to darkness, and the only light now was the light projecting from the screen. My little brother took out his bag of candies he snuck in and started to eat them obnoxiously loud. About 5 minutes into the movie, over my brother's loud candy wrapper noises, which we told him to stop for the record, I thought I heard a pretty loud sound come from above and behind us. I waited a few seconds to sneak a glance behind us and saw that the guy that was sitting in the top corner had moved down a row, which was odd. But again, I didn't give him more than a second thought. Another 5 minutes later, when the movie was already starting to get interesting, again I heard a sound come from behind us. Again I turned when I thought it wouldn't be too obvious, and again the guy was a whole row closer to us. I leaned to my girlfriend and said while chuckling, "Don't look, but the guy keeps moving closer to the screen." She shrugged her shoulders and didn't even show interest in checking. I told myself if he did it again, then I would have a problem and manage to get back into the movie. I'd say another 5 minutes later, without even hearing anything this time, I just turned around with curiosity and saw the man a whole row closer, and this time he wasn't at the last seat of the row anymore. He was moved further down the row closer to us now. He was only 3 rows behind us. I nudged my girlfriend and then she turned around. Then she looked at me and gave me a confused, concerned kind of look. She asked me if we should move and I said definitely not. At this point I wasn't able to pay attention to the movie anymore. Even though I was facing the screen, I felt like the man's gaze was hitting me in the back of my head. I told myself if he moves closer I would turn around and firmly ask what he was doing. But then I also thought, what if I'm looking too much into this? What if he's just a normal guy who happens to keep switching seats for better view? Once more I turned around and the man was only 2 rows away from us now, closer to the center of the row, or rather directly behind us, and head just completely down looking at his lap. I didn't even bother to check what he was looking at. He could have been looking at nothing. I literally opened my mouth ready to say something, but I was just too much of a coward. I was only 16 last year and pretty skinny. My little brother got up during a slow part of the movie to go to the bathroom. About a minute later, I turned to see if the man had gotten closer again, this time actually ready to say something, but I was shocked to see nobody behind us. It was completely empty. I told my girlfriend and she said, "Good." But then I stood up in pure fear, thinking of my little brother, telling my girlfriend to wait there and running out of the room and into the empty theater hall. I saw the man in the grey hoodie entering the man's bathroom down the hall. Fearing for my little brother's safety, I ran down the hall towards the bathroom, opened the door and saw the man literally on his knees, peeking under the 2 stall doors. Then he looked at me, and at the same time I heard my little brother call me from down the hall. I ran to him, got my girlfriend out of the movie room, and we went to the front desk. The team working in the front ticket stand called the police and showed us and the cops the video footage of the man walking down the hall, and then we filed police report. I'm just so grateful that my brother went to a different bathroom down the opposite direction of the hall, cause if he had been in there, even with my showing up to save him, I have no idea what would have happened. It's been over a year now, and the man was never identified.
This is a very weird story that took place a few months ago. I still live in the same house this happened in. I have an electrical outlet under my bed that I use to charge my phone with. I leave my phone up on the ledge above my bed every night, usually using it as an alarm. However, something strange started happening on a Monday night in February. I woke up to my alarm clock blasting. Only it was still dark out. I looked at my actual alarm clock sitting on my desk. It was 4 in the morning. I wasn't sure if I'd accidentally set a new alarm. The alarm was titled Down. I unset it and went back to sleep, not overthinking it. The next night, I woke up again to the sound of my phone's alarm clock blasting. I saw that the time was 3 in the morning, and the alarm clock title was set to Beneath. No way had I set that alarm. I would remember something like that. I figured my brother was playing a joke on me somehow. The next morning, I told my dad to tell him to stop messing with my alarm clock, that it's interrupting my actual sleep on school nights. But he swore on his life that he had never touched it, and I kinda believed him. That night, I put a password on my phone and wrote it on a sticky note just for safekeeping. I hid the sticky note on the wall behind my bed and made sure no extra alarms were set. The only one was set for 8 a.m. I fell asleep, but once again, I woke up to the blasting alarm clock in total darkness. 2 a.m. The alarm was titled The. I was a little freaked out now. Something was really wrong with my phone. I was sure someone was hacking into it. The next day I left it off for the whole day in hopes that whoever was messing with it would forget about it. And that night I used my actual alarm clock on my desk as an alarm instead. I set it to 8 a.m. and went to sleep, but when I woke up, there was once again no sunlight. My alarm clock was off, so I couldn't see the time. It was my phone. It had been moved to the ledge, but the alarm clock sound wasn't the usual marimba. It was some kind of distorted screaming sound. I turned off the alarm, which was titled Bed. It was 1 in the morning. I was laying there clueless, not knowing what to think. My phone was at 10%, so I reached down under my bed to try and find the charger that's normally plugged into the wall. It was missing. And then, at the worst possible time, I realized exactly what it all meant. The 4 alarm titles formed a sentence: Down beneath the bed. I tried to pull my arm away, but it was too late. I felt a hand grab my arm and squeeze tight. I screamed as loud as I could, loud enough for all the neighbors to hear. I heard my parents' bedroom door open and footsteps running over to my room. My door opened and my dad barged in with a baseball bat. He saw that I was being pulled down to the edge of my bed. My dad reached under my bed and grabbed a hold of the man hiding under. He knocked him out with the bat and called the cops. The man clearly didn't plan that out, as he basically trapped himself under my bed. Police told us that he was a registered sex offender who had been arrested 10 times. He's extremely messed up in the head, and clearly gains pleasure from messing with and scaring his victims. It scares me the most that he was in our house, and under my bed, for 4 days.
When my best friend Lizzie and I were 18, we went on our first vacation alone together to London. We were staying at the London Marriott Hotel. The first thing we did upon arrival was of course to get there and drop off all our luggage. We'd be there for a whole week, so we had to set our itinerary. It was late in the day already, so we didn't have much time that day, but we did want to see something at least. So we went to see Big Ben, which is that iconic big clock tower that everyone knows in pictures when you think of London. After that, we went to a nearby tavern for dinner called St. Stephen's Tavern. It was money, but good thing our dads were paying for this trip. After leaving the tavern, it was like 9 o'clock and we were wanting to go out and experience the nightlife. We agreed we'd first have to go back to the hotel and shower and change first. As we were walking, a young attractive man overheard us talking about the nearby bars we were looking at on our phones, and he stopped us. Something about him immediately was just charming that grabs both my and Lizzie's attention, and if it weren't for that, maybe we wouldn't have been so receptive to him telling us about a big apartment party that one of his rich friends was throwing that night, and that 2 attractive ladies like ourselves wouldn't fit right in. Lizzie and I looked at each other and laughed. We said we'd be down and he said, "Great, the party doesn't start till 11. He asked for my number, so I gave it to him. Then he said he'd text me the details and see us later, and down the street he walked. Lizzie and I were super excited. It was only the first night and we were already invited to a crazy London party. We figured if we played our cards right to the wealthy people at this apartment party, we would have people to hang out with the rest of the trip. We got back to the hotel, showered and changed, and we pre-gamed with a little vodka first to loosen ourselves up. Think we drank more than we should have though. I texted the guy we met, realizing we didn't even get his name. He texted back quickly with the address to the apartment. So we loudly marched into the street to wait for our Uber. It was a 15-minute Uber drive to get to the apartment. And when we got there, we couldn't believe how different the architecture of this apartment building was compared to something back home in America. I pressed the code for the apartment and we were quickly buzzed in. We took the elevator to the 5th floor. We were excited but nervous, not knowing what to expect. The alcohol was definitely helping though. I knocked on the door to the apartment, but we didn't hear music inside, which was odd. Until the young man from earlier opened the door. He hugged us hello and welcomed us into his dead quiet apartment. He shut the door and we asked, "Where is everyone?" He said, "Oh, it's still early, don't worry." We looked around the apartment and it was not at all as big as we were expecting for an apparent rich guy. We asked where his friend who owned the apartment was. The man said he was getting things ready in his room. He told us to sit and make ourselves comfortable. Remember looking at my phone and seeing it was like 11:30. Lizzie and I sat down and I could tell by her face she was as put off by this as I was. The man sat down on the same couch as us, next to me. He was uncomfortably close. Suddenly another man came out from another room. He didn't say anything. He didn't smile as he walked towards the door to the apartment, and he just stood there. The man on the couch with us started asking us questions like where we were from and if there was just two of us visiting here. I started feeling sick to my stomach. The man next to us got up and went to the kitchen to get us some drinks. The man by the door stood there. Lizzie was to the left of me, so she was more hidden from view. I whispered in her ear to dial 911, and I noticed her tapping on the phone multiple times, indicating to the call taker that we needed help. Lizzie then suddenly called out loudly to the man in the kitchen, "This is apartment 5C, right?" The man at the door said yes in a deep, unfriendly voice. I whispered to Lizzie again that we needed to stall and not to drink any drinks the man gave us. As I was whispering to Lizzie, the man standing at the door called to the man in the kitchen to hurry up with the drinks. And then he came back from the kitchen with the drinks. I had to think on my feet to stall as long as possible before drinking. Whatever he just said in front of us, I put on a fake and bubbly persona and said we should play Would You Rather. I know it sounds juvenile, but I had to think of a game that didn't involve drinking. The man seemed to play along with it, so me and Lizzie started coming up with Would You Rather questions. And he started coming up with some of his own, but he would often suggest we take a sip of our drinks, saying the guest would be there soon and that we needed to loosen up some more. I stalled for as long as I could, saying we already drank a lot, but we'd be down to drink more in a little bit. I remember when things were about to turn really south, the two men looked at each other. Then the bigger, scarier man at the door came over and said, "All right, drink your drinks." He was about to reach for one of the glasses, probably force in my face. And there was an aggression banging at the door, followed by a man shouting, "Police!" The younger man looked at us and asked, "Did you call the police?" "No, why and when would we?" But my voice cracked as I said this, indicating I was nervous. Lizzie apparently just decided the hell with my story and screamed, "Help!" The police started to attempt to kick the door down, but the bigger man screamed, all right," and opened the door with his hands up. The two men tried playing innocent. Lizzie and I had to fabricate the story a little bit, saying that the two men basically forced us into the apartment and wouldn't let us leave, and we were pretty sure that they drugged our drinks. That was enough to get the men arrested. A second police car arrived to escort us to the station for further questioning. The drinks were tested, and it turned out to no surprise they were roofied. This was definitely a scarring experience, but we didn't let it ruin our trip to London. In fact, we never told our parents until years later, just because it would probably make them less likely to let us travel anymore. The alcohol definitely didn't help our initial decision making in the night, but our advice would probably be don't ever trust strangers, no matter what they look.
I remember it like it was yesterday. I woke up late thanks to me forgetting to set up my alarm the night before. When I saw 7 a.m. on the clock, I sprang out of bed and began pulling my clothes on furiously. I needed to be at my bus stop by 7:05, so that meant I had no time to have breakfast today. I hurriedly scooped my books and worksheets into my backpack and dashed down the stairs and out of the front door. There was my bus. The last kid got on board before the bus took off. I hastened my sprint as the bus began pulling off, but the driver sped up and I was left behind, dejected, listless, and without a mode of transportation. My school was about 20 minutes away from the bus stop. I had no money and had never really ridden the public bus. My 10-year-old mind was in a complete state of panic. I knew my mom would kill me if she found out from my teacher that I had skipped school. For around 10 to 15 minutes, I was standing over there, puzzled, thinking what to do next. I looked up and noticed a car pull up in front of me. The driver's window was already rolled down and I could see a middle-aged man sitting in the driver's seat, gazing at me. He flashed me a toothless smile before speaking.
"What's wrong, kid?"
"I missed my bus," I said with an air of defeat. The man stared at me for a moment before responding.
"Need a ride?"
I had been taught to never talk to or accept rides from strangers. Still, I was a desperate 10-year-old who didn't want to get into trouble for missing school. "Yeah," I said. I hopped in and slammed the door behind me. The inside of the man's car was filthy. There were cans and old food packages on the back seat, and the smell was overwhelming. I coughed and reached to let down the window.
"Sorry, kid. The window doesn't work and neither does the door from the inside,"
said the man. I looked at the man who was looking at me intently. There was a hint of glee in his dark eyes, and I was beginning to feel very uncomfortable.
"Where do you go to school?"
he asked, and I told him. The man smiled again and began driving. When I looked at the driver's seat closely, I saw what appeared to be a little girl's rainbow-colored bracelet hanging on it. My uneasiness was out of control, and though I tried to look away quickly, the old man caught me looking at it.
"Oh, this. It was my daughter, Jessica's. She's no more now. I think about her every day."
I stared out of the window to notice that the man was going in a completely different direction than what my bus usually takes. What happened to her?" I asked numbly. The old man was quiet for a few seconds before answering.
"Well, she passed away in a car accident. The roads are dangerous, you know, especially in this town."
My heartbeat was increasing by the second. I wondered if the old man had been lying about the door not working. I was strongly considering yanking at it anyway.
"How old are you, young lady?"
the man asked. 10, I replied quickly, trying to hide my nervousness, but failing miserably.
"That's how old my Jessica was when she passed."
I looked out of the window and I felt relieved. We were on the street my school was on. How could have we gotten here so quickly? The man might have taken some kind of shortcut, I muttered to myself. The car pulled down in front of my school. The man hopped out and walked over to my side and opened the door for me. I climbed out of the car and said, "Thank you for the ride, sir." The man nodded and gave me another smile. He got back into the car and drove away. I watched him go, wondering What the hell had just happened? What had my 10-year-old intuition been telling me? This man was clearly harmless, or else I probably wouldn't be at school right now. I shook my head and walked into the building. To my surprise, all the teachers were crying. I didn't find out why until a while later. My bus had never made it to the school. A car had hopped unexpectedly into the bus driver's lane, and he had swerved hard, causing the bus to topple over the side of the bridge. There were no survivors. The next morning, I was reading the newspaper. There was news about the accident of my school bus. There were photos and names of the students and the bus driver who lost their lives in the accident. I was sad looking at the pictures and reading their names. There was also a picture of the car driver and his daughter whose car bumped onto my school bus. I was shocked to see the picture of the car driver. It was the same man who gave me a ride to my school in his car yesterday. I remember him telling me that his daughter had died in a car accident. I looked at the name of his daughter. It was Jessica. I just realized that the man who dropped me at my school was already dead.
I'm 25 years old, and this story happened to me about 4 months ago. I was doing some late evening shopping at my local Sam's Club. I was looking for items to put in my new apartment and wanted to look at some TVs they had on sale. I think it was around 8 p.m. when I entered the store. The first thing I noticed before entering, however, was a man who stood there near the entrance. He gave me a very long, intense stare. He didn't look well at all. He looked very on edge and jittery. He was wearing a New York Giants cap, a black tank top that had holes in it, and skinny black jeans. He had a poorly shaven face and big red bags under his eyes. I remember looking around at some kitchen appliances when I noticed that the guy from outside was standing in the same aisle. I didn't think twice about it, but after I kept seeing him in almost every section of the store I went to, I wouldn't necessarily say he was stalking me, but it did raise some awareness. After picking up a few items, there was about 25 minutes left until the store closed. I walked over to the TV section and tried to pick out a decent TV that was on sale. I saw a TV that I liked, and then out of nowhere I heard a deep voice ask me, "You need some help, man?" I turned around and it was the guy who's been lingering around me. So I answered, "No, that's okay, thanks," I replied in a firm voice. He then walked off without saying anything. I picked up a TV I liked and I went to check out. I started putting my items into the car. And the TV I tried to put in the back seat, but it didn't fit, so I had to put it in my trunk. Once again, the same guy from earlier came up to me asking me if I needed any help. I told him no, this time in a more impatient voice, and I quickly walked off with the shopping cart to put it back. Thankfully, after returning to my car, the guy had left and was happy to drive home. About 5 minutes into driving, I took a glance in my rearview mirror, and I saw those same baggy red eyes staring right back at me. Before I had a chance to do anything, I felt a hand grab my face, covering one of my eyes, which made me lose control of my car. I crashed into a parked car. The man then climbed over and stole any change I had laying around, grabbed my wallet and keys before quickly running off. A passing car stopped to help me. Thankfully, I wasn't badly injured, only a few cuts and bruises. The Sam's Club and the police were informed of what had just happened. The police checked the security cameras and found the guy just lurking around the parking lot most of the evening, trying to get into unlocked cars and looking for change on the ground. It also showed when I walked away to put the shopping cart back that the man snuck into my car and hid while my back was turned. I think he was some kind of drug addict. Maybe he needed some money badly. I'm glad the only thing he took was some cash, even though he almost took my life.
As a former Uber driver, I've dealt with a whole bunch of unpleasant characters, from the drunken groups of friends on Saturday nights, to the people who pretend to be handicapped to get free rides. But every so often, you may pick up somebody who can just be classified as a straight-up creep. I've picked up a few of these guys, but never one quite as bad as a guy named Tom. It was a Friday night of the year. I had nothing to do, so I figured I'd do some late-night pickups. This was 2 years ago. I was 18 and had a new Honda Accord. My parents kinda spoiled me a bit. I was a very skinny 18-year-old though. That's why my dad told me to always keep a blade in my car, because you never know what kind of nuts are getting into the car. A guy named Tom popped up a couple miles away by a major shopping area. I responded to his request and started driving in that direction. I pulled up in front of the shopping center where I saw a group of teenagers hanging out. It looked like trouble. I hoped this Tom guy wasn't part of this group. A bunch of them looked at me in my car as I slowly passed. Eventually I just hit the gas and went further into the parking lot of the shopping center, wanting to get away from this group. I did 2 laps around the whole parking lot until I finally noticed through my left mirror somebody approaching my car from behind. I rolled down my window and called out Tom, and he called back yes. I told him to hop in. I had to repeat myself 3 times, and given that all I was saying was hop in very clearly, made the situation very weird from the start. The 4th time he finally understood me and walked slowly around the back, getting into the seat right behind me. Usually the people I picked up would sit diagonally from me, which is what I preferred. When people sat right behind me, it just made me a little paranoid sometimes, especially when the person seemed kinda creepy. This guy was old. He had to be in his upper 40s. "Where to?" I asked him. He told me an address, which I entered into my phone. By his voice, I could tell he was a very heavy smoker. Come to think of it, my car was starting to smell like cigarettes too. The address he gave me was 10 miles away, which was fine, since it meant I'd be making more money. I tried making small talk initially, which didn't work out too well. Like if I would ask him a yes or no question, sometimes he would just mumble, and any other questions led to dry responses. I stopped talking when he completely ignored one of my questions. That was within just 5 miles. There was still 5 to go. By the 6-mile mark, things started getting uneasy in there. I was afraid to look into the rearview mirror because I was so sure that he was staring at me. I took a quick half-second glance and saw I was right. He was in fact staring at me. My body forced my foot down heavier on the gas. I wanted this ride to be over sooner. By the 8-mile mark, I started to realize we were in the middle of nowhere. We were on basically a deserted street with woods on either side and occasional buildings. I was growing suspicious now as to where this address he told me actually was. So, while driving, I dragged my finger across my phone to slide the map in the direction of the address. It seemed to lead to a dead-end street with no surrounding streets nearby. I was getting more and more nervous with each passing minute now. I shot a glance back up again at the mirror, and he was still watching me. I finally summed up the courage to ask him if the address he gave me was of his house. There was silence for a few moments, and I thought he was once again going to ignore me, or possibly didn't hear me. But 5 seconds later, he finally answered yes. There was less than a mile left in the drive now, still surrounded by nothing but woods with the occasional empty-looking building. I was approaching the dead-end street that the address he gave me resided on, hoping some houses would come into sight. As the street came up, I slowed down so I could get a good look of it. But nothing could be seen. Just pitch blackness. I could only imagine why he wanted to get me out here alone, so far away from anybody or anything. I casually kept driving, pretending like I missed it, hoping he wouldn't notice. But he did. Instantly, he hopped out of his seat and yelled at me to turn around. Honestly, I felt like my life was on the line, so I apologized and did a quick 3-point turn. As I was reapproaching the dead-end street, I dug my hands into the netting compartment on the side of my seat where I kept my blade. I very quietly flicked the blade open and held it tight in my right hand, ready to use it. I turned down the dead-end road, with my headlights now displaying just what I thought I would see. Nothing but trees on either side. I made it to the end of the road, not a single house or building on the road. I just knew something was about to go down. I was just trying to physically and mentally prepare myself for it. Suddenly, he said in as soft as a voice as he probably could, "Thanks for the ride." I wasn't even thinking about money at this point. He opened his door, but before stepping out, he said, "Could you get out of the car for a second? I need help carrying my bag. I have a bad back." But he didn't have a bag. I knew he didn't. He didn't come in with one. I replied, Yeah, sure, let yourself out and I'll help you in a sec." The shakiness in my voice was too obvious. What happened next, I never imagined would have happened. All of a sudden, I felt pressure on my neck. It took me at least a second before I could realize he was choking me from the back seat. Immediately, I drilled the blade into his left arm and he screamed in pain, releasing his grip on my neck. He fell out of the car and onto the street, and I took that opportunity to turn the car around and practically floor it down the street until I returned to a busy road. I actually didn't end up calling the cops. I was just too scared to do anything but drive home. And by the time I got home, I just wanted to go to sleep and forget about it. Needless to say, I resigned from my Uber driving days after this incident.
I deliver food for an Asian eatery in my town. It's the best gig I could get at my age simply for the tips alone. My friend and I work there together. We are actually the only two who are Asians. My friend usually works the counter and takes phone calls. I usually do deliveries and that's the way I like it. My friend got off the phone during one night shift we had together and told me I'd be doing a delivery after the food was prepared. I was handed a brown paper bag and I was off on my way to the address. That address led me to some small dirty driveway off the main road onto an enclosed property, and the house seemed to be closed off, given that there wasn't a single light on in there and how high the grass was. I called my friend back at the restaurant, and he gave the phone to his boss. Unfortunately, our boss is a stench, in a chic Asian accent, to knock on the door and don't waste the food. I got out from my car and felt grass rubbing against my shins. That's how tall it was. I went up the 3 stairs to the front door and knocked really loud, since there didn't seem to be a doorknob. As I expected, after 30 seconds of waiting, there was no answer. So I got back in my car, and the first thing I did was start texting my friend back at the restaurant. But when I looked up back to the house, this time one of the upstairs lights inside of the house was turned on. So I went back to the door and knocked once again. Only on the first knock, the door pushed open slightly. Someone had opened the door, but there was nobody standing next to the door. I pushed the door open a little more and called out, "Hello." My voice echoed through the empty house. I was waiting to hear footsteps come to the door, but they never did. Obviously, someone had to have opened the door, so if they weren't going to come to the door, I had to assume they wanted me to come in. I stepped into the house as my shoes made the wood floor creak. I called out one more time and this time someone replied back. I heard the words "Aquí arriba" now. I'm not fluent in Spanish by any means, but I knew that "aquí" meant here, and I knew "arriba" meant above. So I put 2 and 2 together and figured they said up here. There was a stairway in the middle of the hallway, so I walked over it. I stopped at the bottom step. I looked up the stairs, and all I saw at the top was an arm reached out over the ledge, doing a little stiff come here motion. I used what little Spanish skills I'd gained from middle school and said something like "Tengo tu comida" as I walked up the stairs. As I got about halfway up the stairs, the arm wasn't there anymore. I got to the top for whoever was just standing by the ledge over the stairs, and I noticed through the tiniest amount of light that the person was now inside a bedroom with the lights turned off. But I didn't see the actual person once again. All I saw was the person's arm doing the same come here motion. It's as if anything about the person's elbow was faded to black in that room. It was such an eerie sight. I knew for certain that I wasn't going in that room though. So I said firmly with confidence, "Buddy, I'm not going in there. You come out here with money or I'll leave." Suddenly the arm pulled away into the darkness of the room ahead of me, and after a few seconds of standing there in silence, I was hit by a flying object. It happened so fast that it took me a few moments to realize just being hit with a stiff, severed arm. It wasn't some plastic Halloween toy. It was a real arm. I ran down the stairs with the food still in my hand and got back to my car. I drove straight to the nearest neighboring house and rang that person's doorbell. When they answered, I told them about what their neighbor had just done to me, and the woman had the most puzzled look on her face. She said nobody's lived in that house for a year. I felt my stomach dropping. Those words hit me. She said she would call the police after we talked about it for a good 5 minutes. Then I went on my way back to the restaurant with the food. I explained the best I could to my boss, and he let it go. I sometimes wonder how things would have played out if I went into that room, and who or what I would have found.
My sister's gone, and an online video has something to do with it. I found my sister watching a video online last night, and I've tried to figure out what it was. I was going to her room to tell her she had to go to bed, but as I approached her room, I heard a voice that wasn't hers. A quick look in showed me that she was watching a video. Before I tell you what I was hearing, let me explain the site she was on. It had a pastel-colored frame around it that consisted of flowers and hearts. In the very center of the page was a video player. The video was of a person in a bunny costume, like one that a mall Easter bunny would wear, but it was creepier than even those ones are. I don't know what it was about it, it just didn't look right. The point of this description is that the website itself was very inviting, and I could see it being very appealing to children with lots of bright greens, pinks, and blues. The bunny in the video was speaking directly to the camera, but I didn't notice that for a moment. As I walked up to the room, I heard a cartoonish voice ask,
"Do you think you can do something for me? Shake your head if you can."
That's when I poked my head around the corner and saw the screen, as well as my sister subtly nodding her head. I quietly kept watching.
"You have a mommy, a daddy, a brother and a sister, right?"
My sister nodded.
"They all told me they want to come play with me, but they don't want you to come. That's not very nice, is it?"
My sister shook her head.
"I am gonna come to your house and pick only one of you to come play with me. Do you know what you have to do if you want me to pick you?"
My sister nodded.
"Good. Can I count on seeing you tonight?"
My sister nodded.
"I can't wait. Your brother is watching us. Get him first."
That's when I burst into her room. I got to her before she could click away from the page she was on. By this point, I was under the impression she was on a Skype call or something, but to my surprise, it actually was a video. I went back to the beginning, and the video played through the exact same way. I asked her why she was on the website, and she shrugged. I thought to get the URL to do some research, but it was just a random jumble of letters and numbers. I clicked exit on the page, then went back and deleted her history. Then she went to bed. I went on my laptop and searched for any kind of site with some semblance to the one my sister had been on. The video wasn't on YouTube or any other video hosting page. I couldn't find a single shred of evidence that the video actually existed. I went to sleep, and after tossing and turning from wondering how the video was so coincidental that it said, "Your brother is watching us," I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up to a quiet house, which is a rarity there. I found my parents in bed, both stabbed to death. My younger sister, the one older than the one I told to go to sleep, smothered with her pillow, and my sister, who was watching the video, nowhere to be found. The only evidence of anyone else being there was a stuffed bunny with the likeness of the bunny from the video, sitting on the couch in our living room with a note in its lap. The note read, "We'll be back for ya, smiley face." The police are currently investigating, but have no leads. What happens if you call 666? 666 is known by most as the number of the beast, or the number of the devil. There is actually a name given to the fear of the number 666. It's hexaxahexatona Did I pronounce that right? I have no idea. But it exists. Look it up. It's real. As is what I'm about to tell you. So what happens if you call 666? Let me show you.
Your call cannot be completed if dialed. Please check the number and dial again.
That's what most everyone gets. This doesn't work because it's too easy.
Your call cannot be completed if dialed.
So if you're watching this video, you're probably wondering, is it really possible to speak with the devil? The answer is yes. If you don't want to know how, please stop watching this now. Here's a question. Are you a gambler? Did you know all the numbers on a roulette table add up to 666? Okay, if you call 666 666 times, on the 666th time, you'll get this.
Call cannot be completed if dialed. Please check the number and dial again.
Sounds familiar, right?
Your call cannot be completed if dialed.
Let it linger for a while.
Please check the number and dial again. Your call can be completed as dialed. Please stay on the line. You have called 666. Your call has been completed.
That's creepy for sure, but it gets worse. Your phone will ring back, not necessarily right away, but at some point, and you'll hear something like this.
Hello? Can you help me? Please? I'm lost.
According to the 666 tracing website, the following voices have been tracked. Girl, 7.
Hello? Can you help me? Please? I'm lost.
Boy, 10.
Hello? Can you help me? Please? I'm lost.
Girl, 5.
Hello? Can you help me? Please? I'm lost.
And girl, 11.
Hello? Can you help me? Please? I'm lost.
They say that this is the devil making contact. If you call 666 666 times, you too may receive a phone call from the devil. I pray it won't lead you to hell, but if it does, I'm sure I'll be seeing you there.
My name is Chris, and this story happened to me last year when I was traveling with my dad across the United States. We were traveling in our RV. We were visiting Nevada. And of course, we had to go and check out Area 51. By the time we got there, it was pretty late and quite dark out. So we thought we would just park the RV, sleep, and check it out in the morning. That night, I think around 1 a.m. my dad was asleep, and I was playing some games on my iPad when I heard some footsteps outside our RV. I took one of my earplugs out so I could listen better, and it sounded like someone was slowly pacing. I took a subtle peek through our blinds. It was pitch black, but you could kind of see something moving. I woke my dad up telling him someone is out there. He took a look out the window and then told me to get a flashlight. I asked him, "You're not going out there, are you?" In a concerned voice, of course. but my dad said we have to see what it is. Nervously, we both went outside. We shined our light towards the figure. It looked to be a man with his back toward us. My dad spoke out, "Hello?" No answer, or even any movement. My dad spoke again, "Hello? Can you hear me?" As we slowly got closer, you could see the man was wearing some kind of gown, like a hospital gown that patients wear. The man was still unresponsive. We got close enough to tap him on the shoulder, and the man slowly turned around. He looked kind of pale as like a ghost, and his eyes were black, like they weren't even human. He stared right at us, and my dad stepped back in shock. Then we heard a noise. It was more footsteps. My dad shined his light in a direction, and what was right in front of us were more men in patient gowns, black eyes, looking right at us. Me and my dad ran back into the RV and drove as fast as we could away from the Area 51. We spent the rest of the night in the motel we found. We never went back to Area 51 after that. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times. It would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night, I almost fell asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but was too terrified to form the words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that I was just dreaming and to go to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open, and said, "See, there's nothing there." To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with that knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door. He asked her what she was doing, and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed a knife, and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into our neighbor's house. I never slept in that living room again.
The following story was told to me by a Japanese friend of mine who said that she read it in a newspaper. I haven't actually seen the newspaper, so I don't know whether it happened or not. There was a group of teenage friends, 2 boys and 2 girls, who went to the same high school. One night, they were having a small party in the house of one of the boys. It was after midnight, and the talk soon turned to scary stories. The friends wanted to test their courage by going to a haunted location. They thought it would be fun to scare themselves by exploring a creepy place in the dark. For years, they had heard stories about an old abandoned school that lay on the outskirts of a town. Everyone said it was haunted. None of the teenagers actually believed in the ghosts, so they wanted to scare themselves. And it seemed like the old abandoned school was the easiest place to explore. One of the girls had a car, so they drove out to the schoolhouse and parked outside the grounds. The four friends decided that they would explore the school individually. The plan was for each individual to walk around the house anti-clockwise. It would take about 10 minutes to circumnavigate the school. The first individual would start off, and when he returned, he would tell the others what he had seen. Then, it would be the turn of the second individual to walk around the school. The first individual, a boy, set off as the remaining three teenagers waited by the car. After a while, they began to grow impatient. It had been more than 20 minutes, and their friend had still not returned. After 30 minutes had passed since the first individual left, the others got tired of waiting. The next girl decided to walk around the school and look for their friend. The two waited and waited, but the girl too failed to come back. The remaining two couldn't understand what was happening. They began to wonder if their friends were playing a joke on them. It had been almost an hour since the first guy had left. The boy and girl who remained behind were very nervous. The girl began to cry and the boy tried to comfort her. Eventually, the boy said, "I'm going to look for the others. If I don't come back after 30 minutes, go straight to the police." After he left, the girl stood alone in the cold and the dark, weeping silently. She waited an hour, but nobody came back. She got into the car, turned the keys in the ignition, and drove to the nearest police station. 4 police officers accompanied the girl back to the school, and as dawn began to break, they launched a search for the 3 missing teenagers. At first, they couldn't find any sign of them on the school grounds, but then they discovered that the side door of the old, disused school gym was standing open. The police went inside. It had old, rusty gym equipments lying in it. There was an eerie silence in the air. It was when they looked inside the toilet in the gym that they found the 3 missing teenagers. They were all hanging from the ceiling by their necks. The police questioned the surviving girl, and she swore that she had been telling the truth. The 3 teenagers had gone to the abandoned school to test their courage. They had no reason to commit suicide. However, after spending weeks trying to solve the problem, the police finally closed the case, saying they could not find any evidence that the teenagers had been murdered. In the end, the incident was explained away as a case of mass hysteria. The police claimed that the 3 teenagers must have been involved in some kind of suicide pact. To this day, nobody in that town will dare to venture out to the old abandoned school after nightfall.
I had cared for an elderly woman with no family who came to us when her husband died. She didn't speak often, but when she did, it was usually just words that made no sense together. I felt so bad for her because ever since she had arrived, so many of the residents in the area that she seemed to enjoy spending time with had passed in such a short time span. She put up a picture of each of them next to the picture of her husband and several others who were probably family to remember them. I had always just felt sorry for her and showed her extra attention that we eventually became close. It just seemed so unfair that she had such luck and kept losing people she cared about. One day she looked at me and said plain as day, "Sweetie, I think I'm done now," and handed me a picture. It was a picture of me and I smiled because it touched my heart that I was that important to her. She passed away nearly a week later and I cried for days. It hit me really hard. She knew it was the end for her and she said goodbye as best she could. A little less than 2 years later, I was talking with a colleague and that elderly woman came up in the conversation. My colleague referred to her as "that crazy bitch," which seemed very out of character for her, and it shocked and offended me deeply. I expressed this to him, not so nicely, and he looked at me with his shocked look and said, "Oh dear, do you not know?" and then explained something to me that I had not known. As it turned out, it came out after some time she had passed that she had killed her husband by poisoning him, and that there was an investigation because it appeared that she had a ritual of befriending someone, obtain a picture of them, and hiding the picture until she could kill them, usually by poisoning, and then displaying a picture as a sort of trophy. After listening to this, I was shocked. I was thinking about the picture of mine she had given to me. It meant that her next victim was me, as I was the person who was close to her. I let that go. I didn't think much about it. It was my night shift. I was in the same ward in which elderly woman used to stay. It was a different patient in there this time. He was sleeping. When I got into the ward, I was thinking about the elder woman, and at that moment she appeared in front of me. She was sitting on the chair where she usually used to sit. She had my picture in her hands. I was shocked, and within 4 to 5 seconds she disappeared. This was some kind of hallucination, I thought to myself. Maybe my mind is playing some tricks with me. I went out of there. Whole night and on my way home I was only thinking about the incident that happened to me in the hospital. When I reached home, I tried to find the picture which elder woman had given to me. To my surprise, the picture was missing. And then all of a sudden my room's lights started to flicker. This was scary. I just ran out of my house. Luckily, just out of the house there was a police station. I ran into the police station. I explained my situation. Police did investigation but didn't find anything. They couldn't do much as the woman was already dead. After the series of these incidents, I felt paranoid to work in that hospital and also to stay at my home. Due to mental issues, I just left the country. I shifted from Canada to Australia. It's been 10 years now. I have never seen the elderly woman after that, and I hope I will never see her again. A few years ago, there was a lady who lived near a mental hospital. One night, she was at home watching TV, waiting for a phone call from her brother. He was flying into town to meet her and was going to call when his plane landed. It was a very stormy night. Suddenly, the television program was interrupted by a news bulletin. The newsreader said that a crazy woman had escaped from the local mental hospital. The doctors said that the crazy woman was very dangerous. She had killed 12 people before she had been caught and sent to the mental institution. They also said she was obsessive compulsive and was obsessed with light switches. The woman was distracted by her phone ringing. It was her neighbor from across the street. He told her that the lights upstairs in one of the windows kept flickering on and off. The lady thanked for letting her know and hung up the phone. She thought it was probably just an electrical problem, but she decided to go upstairs and check, just in case. In the darkened hallway, through the crack under the door, she saw that the lights in one bedroom were indeed flickering on and off. Gripping the door handle, she opened it cautiously. The room was empty. The fan in the room was on, and it was blowing a coat hanging beside it. The coat kept knocking the light switch on and off. Relieved, the lady turned off the fan and went back downstairs. A few minutes later, there was a knock on her door. It was her neighbor again. He told her that the lights upstairs were still flickering on and off, but this time it was in a different window. Together, they went upstairs to check it out. When she opened the door of the room, the lady found it empty. The lights were off. Her neighbor stepped into the room and began switching the lights on and off again and again. At this point, the lady decided that her neighbor must be imagining things. So she thanked him and escorted him downstairs. After he left, the phone started ringing. Her brother called to tell her he had arrived at the airport. "You don't need to pick me up," he said. "I'm getting a taxi. I'll be there in about half an hour." Hello? Hello? Are you able to hear me? Hello? Hello? You're not audible to me. Hello? Then, on the line, he heard a rapsy female voice say,
"I will see you soon."